Welcome to the first set of notes on Congress. All right, so let's talk about, first and foremost, we got to talk about how you get into Congress. So first, it's the constitutional qualifications. The Constitution says for the House, you need to be 25 years of age. You need to be a citizen for at least 7 years, which means you don't have to be born a citizen. You can become a citizen later, and then as long as you've been a citizen for at least 7 years, and you need to live in the state that you are going to represent. For the Senate, you must be 30 years of age, and you need to be a resident, or not a resident, a citizen for 9 years, and then also live in the state. Those are the only constitutional requirements the Founding Fathers put together. Now, for the most part, most people consider some other qualifications, what we refer to as informal qualifications. So this can be their political party, their experience with political office, their education levels. It might be other demographic data such as gender or race. Religion might also be some informal qualifications as well that play into what helps or hurts an individual from being elected to Congress. Demographics of the membership: it is overwhelmingly white, it is overwhelmingly male. There has been improvement in those demographics. It's also overwhelmingly older generation. So boomers are the largest percent in Congress for the currently, but we are starting to see an uptick in Gen X, and then millennials as well. And Gen Z is starting to also creep onto that board a little bit because they are the youngest. They're, oldest Gen Zs are like 25. Organizing Congress. So how do we organize Congress, or how is Congress organized? So first and foremost, Congress is bicameral, meaning it is two house or two chamber. Obviously, we have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. From there, we have parties. So you have your political parties. Your political parties will make up they will either be the majority or the minority, due to the fact that we are a two-party system in the United States. And there are many factors that go into why we are a two-party system. Majority winner, so what's known as the first past the post, the first one who gets the most votes, or past 50%, you get nothing as a second place winner, is a real indicator that we are only going to have a two-party system. So the parties organize within Congress into conferences or caucuses, depending if you're Democrat or Republican, and they will come together and they will establish what are the party agendas. They will be dealing with members, behavior of members within these conferences and caucuses. They will determine how are they going to proceed on certain policy issues that might be coming up for votes on the floor. Then there's also what's called caucuses. And now you need to remember that if we're talking a party caucus or caucuses within Congress, this is different than a caucus for elections. Okay, but a caucuses is individuals in Congress that are coming together to promote a general interest, and it usually will be bipartisan. Not always, but a lot of times they will be bipartisan because it's focused around an issue. So there's like a baseball caucus, there's the Black caucus of the House, or the Black caucus of the Senate, Hispanic caucus. So there's a wide variety. I believe there's like 100 different, between the two chambers, there's about 100 different caucuses, and they are all centered around an issue that Congress may be dealing with. And then they have committees. So committees is actually where the work is done, especially in the House when we get to the legislative process in the House. But committees, there are 4 different types of committees, but this is where a lot of legislative work is done. But this is also, they'll hold hearings in the committee. They will do oversight within the committee. And that is, the committees help the work get done, because not every member is going to be fully involved in every issue. They all are going to develop expertise. So let's talk about the difference between the House and the Senate. Okay, so the House and the Senate, first and foremost, basic representation. The House is going to be population of, they're representing the population, the people, and the Senate is there to represent the states. And then you have power. The House is very centralized in their power structure. You have the speaker at the top, and it funnels its way down. Think of it more like as a pyramid. Whereas the Senate is much more decentralized. Constitutional officers don't do a lot of, don't preside over the Senate. We talked about this in class. There's, they hand that job over to junior members. They don't use the committees in the same fashion that the House does. So the Senate is seen as more prestigious, but they actually kind of run in a looser fashion. In leadership, there is strong leadership in the House. So the speaker is very strong, calling a lot of the shots along with the majority leader, whereas in the Senate, the leadership, especially the constitutionally required leadership, doesn't do a lot of stuff, partly because the top leader is the Vice President of the United States. You have rules. So the rules that they govern themselves by and run their chambers by, in the House, they're very formal rules. They follow them very closely, partly because of their size. There's way more people in the House, and if they do not have a strict adherence to the rules of how voting is going to happen and debate's going to happen, then it will become very disorganized and nothing will get done. With Senate, with only 100 members, they can be much more informal in their rules of business conduct. You then have debate. Because the size of the House, with the number of members they have, when they do a debate on the floor, it is limited. They limit the amount of time that they can debate. Usually it's about a 2-hour debate period, and then each member will get up to like maybe 3 minutes or 5 minutes, depending. If they think it's going to have a lot of people want to speak, they'll reduce that amount down. In the Senate, because there's only 100, and they are much more informal in their business conducting, they do unlimited time. So they can debate a proposal or an amendment to a proposed bill unlimited amount of time, which is like the filibuster is what we're talking about there. Amendments. In the House, they have a limited number of amendments to bills. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about amendments to the Constitution here. We're talking about amendments to proposed bills. It is limited in how they do their amendments in the House. They have to be what is called germane, meaning they have to be related to the issue of the main bill. In the Senate, they are unlimited, meaning they can add an amendment for anything. This is how the pork or pork barreling gets added into proposed bills, because the Senate can add them. It doesn't have to be related. So if you have a bill that is dealing with pollution reduction, they can add something in for, say, commerce or the lumber industry or the agricultural community. Whereas in the House, they cannot do that. Partisanship. The House is very partisan, very much along party lines, whereas the Senate is partisan, but not quite as much. You'll see a lot more reaching across the aisle and trying to build a coalition on certain bills that you will not see in the House. And then you have special functions. So in special functions under the House, tax bills. So revenue raising bills have to start in the House. No other ifs, ands, or buts on that one. That is a House priority. The Senate cannot start a revenue raising bill, but they do get to have a say on it. They can change it and they can vote on it. They also in the Senate, you have foreign policy, so that'd be treaties, and ambassadors are very much a Senate-only area, and then confirmations. So confirmations of ambassadors and judges and executive departments is a Senate function only. And then you have the impeachment process. Now remember the impeachment process is a two-step process. So you have impeachment, which is the House. So you only need a 50%, not a 50%, or a 50% plus one, or a majority vote in favor of impeaching. And all that means is they are accusing the individual, the judge or the executive agent, of high crimes and misdemeanors. What is a high crime? What is a misdemeanor? That is for the House to determine. And then the Senate is the trial. They are the ones who are going to hear the evidence, and they determine whether or not the individual is guilty of their charge that the House is has put up as they're accused of. You have to have 2/3 of the Senate in favor of convicting, and then they determine what the punishment is. There's going to be removal, but they also can then bar the individual from ever holding a public office again. How they vote, and we talked about this in class, but I do want to go over it again. So first off, they're cue givers. They are cues. They they'll kind of give an idea based on what they're saying on how they're going to vote, policies that are important to them, what they're willing to make deals on. I'll vote for this if you vote for that. That's like the log rolling that occurs to try to get bills passed. But models of representation, so the roles that they play. So delegate, we talked about this. This is where they are going to do what their constituents wish for them to do. Okay, so delegates say, this is how I want you to vote on this bill. That is what they do. The next one is trustee. They are like, my constituents need to trust that I'm going to make the proper decision for the district. And it may not necessarily be what they want, but in the long term, because of the information I have, I know this is a better idea. Trust me, I'm making the correct decision. Politico is a combination of a delegate and trustee, and then another option, which is the partisan option. They flip-flop depending on, is this something that I have a lot of expertise on and a lot of knowledge on, then I'm going to be trustee. Is it not, and my delegates and my constituents are very knowledgeable, then I'm going to go delegate. And of course, that fourth one was partisan, which they vote along party lines. All right. Structure of the House. How are they structured? Presiding officers. So the presiding officers, you have the Speaker of the House is the top. It's a constitutionally required. There's the Speaker pro tempore as well that is established through the Constitution. They are the ones who are going to determine what bills are what calendar they're working off of. They have more than one calendar. Where bills are going, they determine what committee a bill is going to get heard in. They can determine if a bill is going to be heard in multiple committees. They are the ones who are determining who gets called on to speak on the floor and for how long. Speaker pro tempore, another constitutionally established position here. They are there in case the speaker, if they ever go into what is called the committee of the whole, we'll talk about that in a later set of lecture notes, then the speaker pro tempore will potentially take over for that because it's a different whole system. Okay, now, just because you're a presiding officer doesn't mean you're a power player. In the House, number one power player is the Speaker. Yep, Speaker is the power player. And then you have the Majority Leader. So whoever the Majority Leader, they are the number two power player in the House. And then you have the Majority Whip. The Majority Whip, majority side, is out there counting votes. Do we have the votes to pass this? Who is on our side? And it's only within their party. Like, who is voting within the party? Do we have issues? Who can we pressure to get on board? Type of deal. And then you have the chair of the majority caucus or the conference. So we talked about before how it was kind of structured. So the party has a caucus or a conference and the chairman of that. And that caucus or conference is determining like committee placements. So that is the reason they're a power player. In the Senate, you have your presiding officers, meaning they're established in the Constitution. You have the Senate president. They refer to them as president if they are in the chamber. It's the vice president of the United States. And then you have the Senate pro tempore, which usually is the senior most member of the majority party. But oftentimes they have junior members that are going to be running the Senate. Even the president pro tempore just is like, great, I got the title, but not actually doing the job. Now the power players on the Senate side, they don't have a speaker, so we immediately start with the majority leader. The majority leader is the one determining what bills are coming to the floor, who, and if they're the debating on them and so forth and so on. Do they not want a bill to come to the floor? Then they can block it. And then you have the majority whip. In the Senate, it's known as the assistant majority leader instead of the whip, but that is the role they play. They are counting, they are communicating with members on votes that are coming up, etc. And then finally, you have your conference or caucus committee chairman. Again, same role as in the House. Okay, so this wraps up our first set of lecture notes over Congress. Make sure you've got all this information down. Of course, you can always rewatch it anytime you need. Have a good night, and don't do anything too stupid. Bye, guys.